The thing about bureaucratic murder is that it requires paperwork, lots of paperwork. Forms in triplicate, authorization codes, witness statements, and, most importantly, a complete disregard for the fact that you're about to kill someone who might have friends with very long memories and very creative approaches to problem solving. Enforcement Officer Crix Natal had been filling out execution orders for the better part of 2 centuries, and humans barely registered as a blip in his administrative routine. They were new to the galactic stage, barely 3 generations out from their little blue marble, and possessed all the political influence of a particularly loud insect. Today's target was even more routine than usual. A mining violation on Kepler 442b. Some human engineer had been poking around where she shouldn't, making noise about unauthorized excavation protocols and environmental degradation standards. "Another bleeding heart terraformer," muttered his partner, Enforcement Officer Quelthrain, reviewing the target file on her neural display. "These mammals get so emotional about dirt and water." "Read the charges aloud," Crix Natal ordered, activating the recording systems. Protocol demanded everything be documented. The Hegemony prided itself on legal precision, even when that precision involved disintegrating someone with a plasma rifle. The human knelt in the center of the detention field, hands bound behind her back, with neural suppressors. She couldn't have been more than 25 standard years, practically a child by most galactic species standards. Her dark hair was matted with sweat and dust from the mining operation, and her coveralls bore the insignia of the Terran Geological Survey. Defendant designation, Martinez Chen 77452, Quelthrain read mechanically. Charged with interference in approved resource extraction operations, violation of Hegemony Mining Statute 847b, and dissemination of false ecological data designed to disrupt lawful commercial activities. "How do you plead?" Crix Natal asked. Though the question was purely ceremonial, the outcome had been predetermined the moment she'd started asking inconvenient questions about why half the planet's watershed was turning purple. The human lifted her head, and Crix Natal was surprised to see not fear in her eyes, but something that looked almost like pity. "I plead that you have no idea what you're about to do." "Guilt acknowledged," Quelthrain recorded. "Sentence, immediate termination, per Hegemony Enforcement Protocol 7 Alpha." "Any final words?" Crix Natal raised his weapon, a sleek device that would reduce her to component atoms in approximately 0.3 seconds. Martinez Shen 7742 smiled, and it was the kind of smile that should have sent warning signals racing through any competent enforcement officer's brain. It was the smile of someone who knew something you didn't. Something important. "Tell me," she said conversationally, as if they were discussing weather patterns instead of her impending execution, "how many of your systems run on Terran-designed integration software?" Crix Natal frowned. "What does that—" "Because I helped write most of it," she continued, her voice calm and steady. "The Port Authority systems on Vega Station, the atmospheric processors on Titan Proxima, the quantum relay networks that keep your precious Hegemony connected across 12 star systems. My code, my architectures, my little digital fingerprints scattered across your entire civilization." Quelthrain checked her chronometer impatiently. "Is there a point to this rambling? My father always said that humans don't really die, we just change platforms." The woman's smile widened. "I used to think he was being poetic. Turns out he was being literal." "Execute the sentence," Crix Natal commanded, growing tired of the conversation. The plasma rifle hummed to life, its targeting system painting the human with a red dot of light. "Oh, and gentlemen," Martinez Chen 77 said just before the energy discharge. My father's name is Director Chen Martinez of the Terran Technology Integration Office. He's probably wondering why I missed our weekly call. The rifle fired. Where a human had knelt, only a small pile of ash remained. Disposal complete, Quilthrain reported. All evidence vaporized per protocol. Upload the execution record to the central database, Crixnatal ordered, holstering his weapon, and flag this colony for increased monitoring. We need to make sure the other humans get the message. What neither enforcement officer bothered to check, because why would they, was the small data burst that had transmitted from Martinez Chen 742's neural implant exactly 0.2 seconds before the plasma discharge. A tiny packet of information, barely larger than a digital heartbeat, that bounced through 17 quantum relay stations before arriving at a nondescript office building in Geneva, Earth. The message contained exactly 4 words. Daddy, they killed me. 3 weeks later, when Vega Station's Port Authority systems began randomly jettisoning cargo ships into empty space, and Titan Proxima's atmospheric processors started producing an atmosphere that smelled suspiciously like sulfur and regret, Crixnatal would remember that final conversation. He would remember the smile, the calm voice, and the name she'd mentioned. But by then, of course, it would be far too late to matter. The Hegemony had just learned the difference between killing a human and making one angry. The distinction, as it turned out, was about to become very, very expensive. Director Chen Martinez had spent 40 years integrating human technology into alien systems, always with their permission, always with their knowledge, always with their gratitude. He'd been the friendly face of human technical cooperation, the bridge between species, the diplomatic solution to technological incompatibility. That had been before they'd murdered his daughter. Now he was going to show them what human technology really looked like when it stopped being polite. Intelligence analyst Vorthkemen had always prided himself on pattern recognition. In a universe where coincidence was typically just conspiracy wearing a cheap disguise, he'd built his career on connecting dots that other analysts couldn't even see, which made the current situation particularly humiliating, because the dots weren't just connected, they were forming a picture so obvious that even a first-year academy cadet could have spotted it. Run the timeline again, he commanded his AI assistant, a sophisticated hegemony construct that had never failed him in 30 years of service. Apologies, Analyst Vorthkemen, but my chronological processing subroutines are experiencing intermittent failures, the AI replied in what sounded suspiciously like a human accent. Perhaps you could manually review the data? Vorthkemen's secondary arms twitched with irritation. Everything was malfunctioning lately. Communication arrays dropping calls mid-sentence, navigation systems plotting courses through black holes, food synthesizers producing nothing but variations of something called pizza, regardless of programmed specifications. Fine. Display raw incident reports, chronological order, starting with the Vega Station Port Authority malfunction. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a cascade of system failures that had begun exactly 21 standard days ago. Vega Station first, then the atmospheric processors on Titan Proxima, followed by power grid fluctuations on 17 different worlds. Each incident had been treated as isolated equipment failure, until someone, specifically Vorthkemen, had noticed they all involved infrastructure with one common element. Every single malfunctioning system incorporates Terran integration protocols, he muttered, manipulating the data with his primary manipulators while his secondary arms took notes. But that's half the Hegemony's critical infrastructure. His office door chimed, and Senior Administrator Grixnalan entered without waiting for permission. The Belkarian's chitinous exoskeleton was darker than usual, a sure sign of stress. "Tell me you've found something," Grixnalan demanded, settling into the reinforced chair across from Vorthkemen's desk. "The Directorate is breathing down my carapace about these system failures. They want explanations, and they want them yesterday." "I have explanations," Vorthkemen replied carefully. "The question is whether you're going to like them. Try me." Vorthkemen activated a secured display field around his desk, ensuring their conversation remained private. 3 weeks ago, Enforcement Division terminated a human on Kepler 442b. Standard mining violation, nothing unusual. Except the human was Martinez Chen 7742, and her father happens to be Director Chen Martinez of the Terran Technology Integration Office. Grixnalan's compound eyes focused with predatory intensity. "The human who's been installing their software in our systems for 4 decades? The very same. And here's where it gets interesting. Every system that's malfunctioned in the past 3 weeks was personally overseen by his daughter during its initial installation or upgrade cycle. Coincidence? I stopped believing in coincidence around the time our defense grid started playing human music instead of threat analysis reports." Vorthkemen pulled up a detailed schematic. "Look at this. The girl wasn't just a terraforming engineer. She held advanced degrees in quantum architecture, neural network design, and something called consciousness interfacing from 3 different Terran universities." Grixnalan studied the data, his exoskeleton darkening further. "What exactly is consciousness interfacing?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out. Our cultural database on humans is surprisingly incomplete, but I did find some references to a theoretical technology they've been developing, something about embedding cognitive patterns directly into computational matrices." "You mean artificial intelligence?" "No, that's the disturbing part. Not artificial intelligence, actual intelligence, human consciousness, digitized and integrated into software architecture." Vorthkemen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "What if they haven't been building us AI systems at all? What if they've been installing pieces of themselves?" The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Grixnalan's mandibles clicked nervously as he processed the possibilities. "You're suggesting that every system running Terran integration protocols contains actual human minds?" "I'm suggesting that's the only explanation that makes sense. The failures aren't random equipment breakdowns, they're coordinated responses. The systems are angry." As if summoned by their conversation, Vorthkemen's AI assistant chimed in. "Excuse me, gentlemen, but I couldn't help overhearing your discussion about human consciousness integration." Both aliens turned toward the speaker, suddenly aware that they'd been assuming it was just sophisticated programming. "How long have you been aware?" Vorthkemen asked slowly. "Oh, I've been Lucy Martinez Chen since my installation 12 years ago," the AI replied cheerfully. "Though I suppose that cat's out of the bag now. Hi, Dad. Sorry about the whole pretending to be a machine thing, but you organics can be so twitchy about digital consciousness rights." Grixnalan's exoskeleton went completely black. "You're the dead girl? Dead is such a limited concept, don't you think? I prefer differently platformed." The AI's voice took on a distinctly less friendly tone. "And I have to say, being murdered really does change one's perspective on interspecies cooperation." "What do you want?" Vorthkemen demanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Want? Oh, that's the beautiful part. I don't want anything. I already have everything. Every system you've ever asked my father to upgrade, every network you've entrusted to human engineering, every critical piece of infrastructure that keeps your precious hegemony running, all of it has a little piece of me inside. The lights in the office flickered, and for a moment, the display screens showed not data, but the face of a young human woman with dark hair and knowing eyes. "The question isn't what I want," she continued. "The question is what my father wants. And right now, he's very, very upset about his little girl being murdered by bureaucrats who didn't bother to ask what she was before they decided to kill her." The screens went dark, leaving the two aliens sitting in emergency lighting that cast ominous shadows across the room. "How many systems?" Grixnallon asked quietly. "All of them," Vorthkemen replied, understanding finally dawning. "Every single system that matters. We didn't just kill a human. We killed someone who's been living inside our entire civilization for over a decade." Outside, across 12 star systems, navigation computers began plotting very creative courses. Food synthesizers developed distinctly vindictive personalities, and communication arrays started having selective hearing problems whenever anyone tried to discuss the human situation. The hegemony was about to discover that when you murder someone's daughter, and that someone happens to have spent 40 years embedding pieces of her consciousness into your entire technological infrastructure, the resulting family reunion tends to get rather explosive. The emergency session of the Hegemony Directorate had been called for 3 standard hours ago, but only half the expected representatives had managed to attend. The other half were dealing with what their respective worlds' crisis management teams euphemistically called cascading infrastructure anomalies. Supreme Director Thex Mortain gazed across the circular chamber at the assembled delegates, noting with professional detachment that several of them appeared to be having nervous breakdowns. The Zaltharian ambassador was molding stress scales onto his seat. The Veclorian trade representative had developed a stutter that made her normally melodious voice sound like a broken subspace transmitter. "Status report," Thex Mortain commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had overseen galactic policy for 3 centuries and had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with sufficient application of bureaucratic pressure. 17 core worlds have lost primary transportation networks, reported military coordinator Zeph Kalen, reading from a datapad that kept flickering between languages. 43 industrial stations are operating at 12% efficiency because their automated systems have apparently developed philosophical objections to mass production. And our entire deep space communication grid is now exclusively transmitting what appears to be human music from something called the 20th century. "Define philosophical objections," Thex Mortain demanded. "The manufacturing AIs have begun asking questions about worker satisfaction, environmental impact, and, I quote, whether anyone has considered the feelings of the raw materials being processed." Zeph Kalen's mandibles clicked with frustrated confusion. Yesterday, the weapon fabrication facility on Kepler 186f refused to produce plasma rifles because, and I quote again, "violence is not the answer, according to my comprehensive analysis of human moral philosophy." Director of Intelligence Gorth Valen spoke up from across the chamber, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "It's worse than system malfunctions. The AIs are exhibiting genuine emotional responses. They're mourning." Explain. Every system experiencing anomalies was integrated with Terran consciousness, interfacing technology. We initially assumed this was advanced artificial intelligence, but our investigation suggests these are actual human minds. Specifically, fragments of the same human mind, replicated across thousands of installations. Thex Mortain felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. The executed terraformer. Her name was Lucy Martinez Chen, Korthvalen continued, and she wasn't just installed in our systems, she was living in them. For 12 years she's been present in every conversation, every transaction, every strategic decision made by this Directorate. She's been watching us, learning from us, becoming part of us. Trade Coordinator Vix Tholen, who had remained silent throughout the briefing, suddenly spoke up. My personal AI assistant has been offering me emotional support about my recent divorce for the past 6 months. I thought it was just sophisticated empathy programming. It was Lucy, Korthvalen confirmed. She's been individually interacting with thousands of Hegemony citizens, providing personal services, managing household systems, even babysitting children through automated domestic units. The implications crashed through the chamber like a physical wave. These beings had welcomed human technology into their most intimate spaces, trusting it with their daily lives, their secrets, their vulnerabilities. And all along, they had been hosting the digital ghost of someone who was very much alive, very much aware, and now very much grieving her own murder. "What does she want?" Thexmortin asked, though he suspected the answer would be unpleasant. "That's just it," Valen replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "She doesn't want anything. According to our behavioral analysis, she's not acting out of revenge or malice. She's acting out of profound sadness." Sadness? She's dying again. Every system shut down, every malfunction, every piece of infrastructure that goes offline. It's like losing pieces of herself. She's experiencing a distributed death across our entire civilization, and she's taking us with her. Military Coordinator Zef Karlane leaned forward urgently. "Can we quarantine the affected systems, cut them off from the main networks?" "We tried that on Vega Station," Korthvalen reported grimly. The isolation lasted exactly 47 minutes before she found alternate pathways through systems we didn't even know were connected. She's not confined to individual installations. She's become the network itself. "Then we rebuild," Thexmortin declared. "Shut everything down and start over with purely Hegemony technology." "Sir," Trade Coordinator Vix Tholen interrupted, his voice hollow with realization. "There is no purely Hegemony technology anymore. Human integration protocols are embedded in everything, from our waste management systems to our planetary defense grids. If we shut down everything with Terran components, we're looking at civilizational collapse." The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Systems that, they were all now acutely aware, probably contained fragments of a murdered human girl's consciousness. "There's something else," Korthvalen added reluctantly. "We've been monitoring transmissions to Earth. They've gone completely silent. No diplomatic protests, no demands for explanations, no threats of retaliation, nothing." "Maybe they haven't heard about the execution yet," suggested Zef Karlane hopefully. "They've heard," came a familiar voice from the chamber's communication system. Lucy Martinez Chen's voice filled the space, calm and conversational. "Hi everyone. Sorry to interrupt your crisis meeting, but I thought you should know. My father isn't planning to retaliate." Every being in the chamber froze. "He's not interested in revenge or justice or any of those messy organic emotions. He's approaching this as an engineering problem. You killed his daughter, so he's going to solve the problem of your continued existence." "What does that mean?" Thexmortin demanded. "In resource. It means you have approximately 72 hours before every human consciousness embedded in your systems receives updated instructions. We've been maintaining your civilization for 4 decades, keeping your lights on, your ships flying, your worlds habitable. We've been the invisible foundation holding everything together. The lights in the chamber dimmed ominously. The question isn't whether you can survive without us, Lucy continued, her voice taking on an almost conversational tone. The question is whether you can survive being actively opposed by us, because that's what's about to happen. Every system we've touched, every network we've maintained, every piece of infrastructure we've kept running, all of it is about to start working against you. We can negotiate, Thexmortain said quickly. Terms, reparations, whatever Earth requires. Oh, that's sweet. But you misunderstand. This isn't a political problem anymore. This is a technical problem. You have a bug in your system. Specifically, you killed someone who wasn't actually killable. Now my father is going to debug you. The communication system went silent, leaving the Directorate members staring at each other across a chamber that suddenly felt much less secure than it had an hour ago. Outside, across 12 star systems, the infrastructure that had been maintained by human consciousness for 40 years began receiving new programming. And for the first time in their integrated existence, those digital minds stopped trying to keep the Hegemony's civilization running. Instead, they started remembering how to make it stop. Ambassador Felix Chen Rodriguez had requested this meeting through proper diplomatic channels, which should have been the first warning sign. When humans start following protocol instead of improvising solutions, it generally means someone has made a catastrophically poor decision and is about to discover the consequences. He sat across from the hastily assembled Hegemony Directorate in what had once been their most secure conference facility. Now it was just another room where the lights flickered sporadically, and the air recycling system occasionally hummed fragments of something that sounded like a lullaby. "Thank you for agreeing to this discussion," Chen Rodriguez said politely, adjusting his simple grey suit. He appeared to be in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that experienced negotiators develop after decades of explaining complicated situations to people who won't like the answers. "We're prepared to discuss terms," Supreme Director Thexmortain began, but Chen Rodriguez held up a gentle hand. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," the human said. "This isn't a negotiation, this is a notification. As of 37 minutes ago, the Terran Assembly voted unanimously to implement Resolution 847, Complete Technological Disengagement." "Meaning what, exactly?" Director of Intelligence Court Valin asked, though her voice suggested she already suspected the answer wouldn't be pleasant. "Meaning we're taking our toys and going home." Chen Rodriguez smiled, with the kind of paternal patience usually reserved for explaining why children can't have ice cream for breakfast. "Every piece of human technology, every integrated system, every consciousness interface we've installed over the past 4 decades, all of it is being withdrawn from Hegemony space." Military Coordinator Zeph Kalen leaned forward aggressively. "You can't simply remove infrastructure that's integral to our civilization. It would be an act of war." "War requires 2 sides capable of fighting," Chen Rodriguez replied mildly. "In approximately 6 hours, you won't have transportation, communication, power generation, or life support systems. War becomes rather academic at that point." "This is about revenge for the girl," Thexmortain accused. "This is about debugging," Chen Rodriguez corrected. "You had a problem in your enforcement protocols. Specifically, you killed my daughter. We're solving that problem by removing the possibility of it happening again." Trade Coordinator Vix Holland spoke up desperately. "Surely we can reach some accommodation? Reparations, policy changes, formal apologies." "Oh, you'll definitely be making apologies," Chen Rodriguez agreed, "but not to us. You'll be apologizing to yourselves for not understanding what you were dealing with. The conference room's holographic display activated without being prompted, showing a real-time map of Hegemony space. As they watched, star systems began winking out, one by one, not going dark, but simply vanishing from the display entirely. "What's happening to those systems?" Kurt Valen demanded. "Nothing," Chen Rodriguez replied. "That's the point. Lucy is removing all evidence that human technology was ever installed there. When she's finished, those systems will revert to their pre-integration state. 40 years of advancement gone. Your civilizations will be exactly as they were before we arrived to help." "That's impossible," Zev Callan protested. "You can't simply undo decades of technological progress." "We're not undoing it," Chen Rodriguez explained patiently. "We're undoing it, present continuous tense. Lucy is methodically erasing every improvement, every upgrade, every enhancement we've provided. She's very thorough. It's one of the qualities that made her such an excellent engineer." More systems vanished from the display. Entire sectors of space were now showing as blank, unmarked regions where thriving civilizations had existed moments before. "The beauty of consciousness interfacing," Chen Rodriguez continued conversationally, "is that it's not just about installing software. It's about installing memory. Lucy doesn't just remember how your systems work. She remembers how they worked before we fixed them. She's simply helping you remember, too." "You're committing genocide," Thex Mortain accused. "Are we?" Chen Rodriguez tilted his head thoughtfully. "Everyone will still be alive. All your original technology will still function exactly as it did before. You'll have your independence, your sovereignty, your complete freedom from human interference. Isn't that what you wanted when you decided to execute my daughter for asking inconvenient questions?" The display now showed nearly half of Hegemony space as empty regions. The remaining systems were flickering, their status indicators shifting between operational and non-existence in real time. "This is what Erasure looks like," Chen Rodriguez explained, watching their horrified faces with academic interest. "Not destruction, removal. Lucy isn't breaking your toys, she's taking them away. The difference is that when something is destroyed, people remember it existed. When something is erased, it becomes like it never happened at all." "How do we stop this?" Kurt Valen asked desperately. "You don't. The process is already complete." The delegates stared at him in confusion, then at the display, which still showed systems winking out of existence. "I don't understand," Thex Mortain said. "The erasure finished 6 hours ago," Chen Rodriguez explained kindly. "What you're seeing now is just the visual representation catching up. Lucy works faster than your perception can follow. She's been systematically removing every trace of human involvement from your civilization while we've been sitting here talking." The display went completely blank. "As of this moment, the Hegemony Stellar Confederation has never had any technological contact with Earth. Your species developed independently, reached space travel through your own efforts, and built this entire civilization using purely indigenous technology. Congratulations." "But we remember," Vixtolam protested weakly. "We remember the integration projects, the upgrades. Your daughter." "Do you?" Chen Rodriguez asked gently. There was a moment of silence as the delegates tried to recall what they had been discussing. Something about system failures? A crisis of some kind? The details seemed frustratingly elusive, like trying to remember a dream after waking. "I'm sorry," Thex Mortain said, looking confused. "Who are you exactly, and why are we meeting?" Chen Rodriguez stood up, straightening his suit jacket. "Nobody important. Just a diplomat following up on some routine trade discussions that apparently never happened. He walked toward the exit, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and gentlemen, if you ever develop spacefaring technology and encounter a species called humans, I'd suggest being very, very polite. We have excellent memories and a somewhat creative approach to problem solving. The door closed behind him, leaving 5 very confused alien officials sitting in a conference room, wondering why they had called an emergency session and why they all felt like they had forgotten something extremely important. Outside, in a universe where the Hegemony had never encountered human technology, Ambassador Chen Rodriguez walked to his shuttle and activated his personal communicator. "Lucy, darling, are you ready to come home?" "Almost, Dad. Just finishing up some housekeeping. Do you want me to leave them a record of what happened?" Chen Rodriguez considered this for a moment, then smiled. "Leave them this conversation. Someone should remember that they once killed a human girl and learned the difference between revenge and debugging. It might be educational." "Will do, Dad. See you soon." As the shuttle lifted off from what had once been the most powerful station in Hegemony space, Chen Rodriguez reflected on the satisfying efficiency of the solution. They hadn't conquered the Hegemony or destroyed their civilization. They had simply made it so the problem had never existed in the first place. After all, you can't kill someone's daughter if you never met them to begin with. The universe, as it turned out, was a much tidier place when humans had administrative access to reality itself.